In the sultry embrace of St. Francisville, Louisiana, where ancient oaks weep Spanish moss and the air hums with secrets older than the river itself, the year 1872 cast a long shadow over the Harvine plantation. Known as Magnolia House to those who dared speak its name aloud, the estate loomed like a specter of the South's fading grandeur. Its once dazzling white columns, now yellowed like the brittle pages of a forgotten ledger, stood sentinel against the lush, untamed landscape. The iron gates, rusted and foreboding, guarded whispers of other names, cursed names, muttered only in the dim glow of fireflies. The sagging verandas, heavy with the weight of unspoken tragedies, creaked beneath the burden of a legacy that refused to rest. The summer air hung thick as molasses over the estate that August evening, fireflies punctuating the gathering dusk like wandering souls. Crickets sang their nightly chorus, a steady rhythm beneath the occasional mournful call of a whippoorwill. Inside the main house, behind heavy damask curtains that stirred in the feeble breeze, Eliza Harvine clutched her swollen belly and prayed to a God she was no longer certain heard her. This would be her third child, though no living offspring graced the nursery upstairs. The room remained perpetually prepared, a walnut cradle draped with fine lace, porcelain dolls with vacant eyes arranged on shelves, a rocking horse forever waiting for its first ride. The two small gravestones in the family plot told the rest of the story. Abigail Harvine, born 1867, died 1880. William Harvine, born 1869, died 1882. Neither firstborn had survived beyond their 13th year. It was the same with the master's siblings, whispered Matilda, the gay-haired house servant who had been with the Harvines since before the war, and his father before him, and his grandfather, too. No Harvine firstborn ever sees 14 summers. The family histories recorded in the leather-bound Bible confirmed this peculiar tragedy, stretching back 7 generations to when the first Harvines had claimed this land from the swamp. 23 firstborn children, 23 deaths before the 13th birthday was complete. Some succumbed to fever or accident, others to bizarre circumstances that defied medical explanation. Old Dr. Chemo had declared it merely unfortunate coincidence, though his eyes betrayed his unease when summoned to Magnolia House. The plantation workers from the quarters tiptoed around a different explanation, one involving a Creole woman displaced when Jonathan Harvine's ancestors seized her ancestral lands. Her curse, they said, still lingered in the fertile soil that nourished the sugarcane, in the water drawn from the well behind the kitchen house, in the very air that filled the lungs of Harvine children. Now Cornelius Harvine paced the hallway outside his wife's bedchamber, pocket watch in hand, counting seconds that stretched like years. The child would be born tonight under the waning gibbous moon. Another firstborn to love, to raise, and if history were to be believed, to bury before the bloom of adolescence transformed child to adult. In the corner of the plantation cemetery, a fresh plot had already been measured, though no one would admit to the grim calculation. The undertaker in town kept a small coffin in reserve, knowing the Harvine custom of preparedness. And somewhere in the sprawling house, amidst the imported furniture and fading portraits, a clock ticked away, counting down 13 years that seemed both infinite and cruelly brief. Eliza's screams ascended through the house like tormented spirits, punctuated by the midwife's stern encouragements. Outside the birthing room, Cornelius clutched the silver crucifix that hung about his neck, a family heirloom passed down alongside their terrible legacy. The parish priest, Father Tobido, had been summoned not merely to provide comfort, but to perform the baptism immediately. No Harvine firstborn was permitted to exist unbaptized for even a day, lest the curse claim them prematurely. The grandfather clock in the foyer struck midnight, its sonorous chimes reverberating through the cavernous halls. The house itself seemed to inhale and hold its breath, waiting. Portraits of Harvine ancestors lined the corridor, their oil-painted eyes following Cornelius as he paced. In each frame, a parent stood with hand resting possessively upon a child's shoulder. Children who had all been interred in the somber family plot that sprawled beneath the ancient live oak. Master Harvine called Matilda, appearing like an apparition at the end of the hallway, her dark skin glistening with perspiration in the lamplight. "It's time," In the years following the war between the states, the Harvine fortune had diminished considerably. The once grand plantation maintained only a quarter of its former workforce, now paid meager wages instead of suffering under the lash. Yet the relationship between master and servant remained fraught with the shadows of bondage. Matilda had delivered every Harvine child since 1845. She had also prepared each firstborn's body for burial. The vast library downstairs contained volumes of medical texts Cornelius had imported from Philadelphia, London, and Paris. Desperate attempts to understand what claimed his family's heirs. One shelf held journals documenting each child's development, searching for patterns that might reveal some hereditary ailment. Another contained arcane works on regional folklores and superstitions, acquired discreetly through book dealers who asked no questions. A piercing cry cut through the humid night. Not Eliza's pain, but the first wail of new life. Relief and dread intertwined in Cornelius's heart like honeysuckle and nightshade. "A daughter, sir," announced Dr. Chemo, emerging with sleeves rolled to the elbows, hands still pink from washing. "Healthy lungs, all limbs accounted for. Mrs. Harvine is weakened but stable." The neighboring plantations would expect a celebration. Mint juleps served on silver trays, a christening gown displayed for admiring matrons, perhaps even a small orchestra brought upriver from New Orleans. The Harvines would perform these social obligations with hollow smiles, knowing their joy carried an expiration date 13 years hence. In the kitchen house, separated from the main dwelling by a covered walkway, the cook Josephine slipped a sprig of dried vervan into the soup destined for the new mother's recovery. Among her people, brought generations ago from Sandang. Such herbs were said to ward off malevolent spirits. The household staff had their own traditions to protect the doomed Harvine children practiced in shadows and whispers. Unofficial baptisms in sugarcane fields under full moons. Protective Grieg GRE tucked into the corners of cradles. Prayers offered to saints the church barely recognized. Cornelius entered the bedchamber where Eliza lay propped against embroidered pillows, her copper hair plastered to her forehead, cradling their newborn daughter. In her exhausted eyes, he saw not just maternal tenderness, but the terrible knowledge that they had created another sacrifice to whatever dark covenant haunted their bloodline. "She shall be called Eleanor," Cornelius declared, his voice barely audible above the chorus of night creatures beyond the window. "After my grandmother." The choice was deliberate, almost defiant. Grandmother Eleanor had been a second-born child, spared the Harvine curse, who lived to the venerable age of 78, the longest-lived Harvine in their sordid history. Perhaps the name itself carried some protective charm. Father Tobido performed the baptism with unusual solemnity, his weathered hands trembling slightly as he administered the holy water. His cassock, threadbare at the elbows, carried the faint perfume of incense and candle wax. The old priest had baptized and buried 2 Harvine children already. His eyes rheumy with age and whiskey avoided meeting Cornelius's gaze directly. "May God, in his infinite mercy," he intoned, the Latin phrases flowing from his lips with practiced rhythm, "protect this child from all harm, visible and invisible." The household staff clustered at the doorway, their faces solemn masks of ceremony, though Josephine's fingers worked a small amulet hidden in her apron pocket. Matilda stood closest, her tall figure straight despite her 60 years, silver hair pulled tightly beneath a head wrap of indigo cloth. She alone dared to look directly at the infant, her dark eyes assessing. "Strong one, this child," she murmured, reaching out a gnarled finger to touch Eleanor's flushed cheek. "Got the fight in her." Indeed, Eleanor Harvine entered the world with an unusual vigor. Where the previous Harvine firstborns had been delicate creatures with translucent skin and reedy cries, Eleanor's lusty wails rattled the crystal pendants on the bedside lamp. Her tiny fists punched the air with surprising force, and her complexion bore none of the pallor that had marked her siblings from birth. Within a fortnight of Eleanor's arrival, Cornelius summoned Isaiah Thornfield, a bespectacled scholar from Boston with unconventional theories about hereditary afflictions. The man arrived wearing a frock coat of severe cut, his collar high and stiff, his demeanor that of someone more comfortable among books than plantation society. "I make no guarantees, Mr. Harvine," Thornfield stated as he arranged peculiar instruments on the library table. Science has not yet fully illuminated the mysteries of bloodline maladies, but I shall observe the child throughout her development and record every relevant detail. Thornfield's methods scandalized proper St. Francisville society, measuring the circumference of Elalaners. Skull Monthly, collecting samples of her hair and nail clippings, documenting the precise shade of her developing irises. Local matrons whispered behind fans about Yankee witchcraft and godless experimentation, but Cornelius remained unmoved by their censure. What price was too high to save one's child? Eliza, meanwhile, recovered from childbirth with remarkable quickness, driven by a mother's determination. She had begun keeping her own journal, separate from her husband's clinical documentation. In it, she recorded not medical observations, but moments of joy, Eleanor's first smile, the sweet milky scent of her breath, the perfect curl of her miniature fingers around Eliza's own. We shall love her completely, Eliza whispered to the sleeping infant one evening as twilight painted the nursery walls in violet shadows. Whatever time we are granted, a change came over Ella in her 6th year. Subtle at first, like the initial browning of autumn leaves before they surrendered to decay. The child, who had flourished against all expectations, developed a peculiar habit of rising before dawn, her small bare feet making no sound as she traversed the polished cypress floors to stand beneath the portrait of Abigail, her long-deceased sister. "She speaks to me," Eleanor confided one morning to Matilda, who had discovered the child bathed in the grainy blue light of pre-dawn, her nightgown pristine white against the shadowed hallway. "Abigail says, 'They're waiting for me in the cane fields.'" Matilda's arthritic fingers formed a protective sign at her waist, hidden within the folds of her dress. "Who waits, child?" she asked, though her lined face suggested she feared the answer. "The others, all 13 of them." Ella voice carried an unnatural clarity, her pronunciation too precise for a girl of 6. "They hold hands in the mist when the moon is high. They want me to join their circle." The household staff began noticing curious arrangements left in Ella wake. A semicircle of her porcelain dolls positioned facing her empty bed, their glass eyes reflecting lamplight with unnerving focus. Small towers of smooth river stones appeared on window sills, balanced with impossible precision. Dried magnolia petals, brown and curled like ancient fingers, would be found scattered in perfect spirals across the nursery floor. Dr. Thornfield documented these developments with scientific detachment, though his handwriting grew increasingly agitated in his private notes. Subject exhibits behavioral anomalies consistent with ancestral patterns at precisely the midpoint between birth and predicted terminus, he wrote. One evening, the nib of his pen tearing the paper in places. One humid August night, precisely 6 years and 6 months after Eleanor's birth, Josephine discovered the child standing in the kitchen house well past midnight, methodically arranging chicken bones into a peculiar pattern that made the old cook's heart stutter in her chest. The bones formed a symbol no Christian would recognize, yet seemed disturbingly familiar to Josephine, who had learned certain forbidden knowledge from her grandmother. "What are you making, child?" Josephine whispered, reluctant to disturb the midnight silence, yet more afraid to allow the design's completion. "A key," replied Eleanor, her eyes reflecting the single candle's flame as twin points of amber light. "Abigail says, we need a key to unlock the door that keeps us here." Eliza began finding her daughter's journal entries altered. Childish drawings of the plantation overlaid with elaborate patterns that resembled the branching of blood vessels or the winding paths of labyrinthine gardens. In one corner of each drawing, 13 stick figures stood holding hands in a circle, with the 14th figure always drawn slightly apart, as if hesitating to join them. Cornelius removed all timepieces from the nursery after. Ella demonstrated an uncanny ability to announce the hour without reference to clock or watch. 6 years and 7 months and 12 days, she would recite unprompted, her voice sing-song, yet eerily devoid of childish inflection. 5 years, 5 months, and 18 days remaining. The summers in St. Francisville passed with merciless heat. Time measured in the growth of sugarcane and the slow transformation of Ella from peculiar child to inscrutable young girl. By her 9th year, her copper hair had darkened to the rich auburn that marked the Harvine women, and her eyes, once the indeterminate blue of infancy, had settled into a disconcerting amber green that caught the light like polished citron. Isaiah Thornfield's documentation grew more voluminous, his clinical observations peppered with increasingly troubled personal aids. May 17, 1881. Subject continues normal physical development, though remains below average weight despite adequate nutrition. Most concerning is her growing preoccupation with the family cemetery. Today discovered her making meticulous sketches of the 13 firstborn gravestones, complete with accurate dates despite never having been taught to read the weathered inscriptions. When questioned, subject replied, "They told me their stories. I'm the last page of the book." Josephine took to hanging sprigs of rue and rowan above every doorway, while Matilda secretly baptized the threshold each morning with water blessed by a conjure woman who lived deep in the cypress swamp. The Harvine household maintained its veneer of gentile southern propriety, hosting occasional soirees where Ella Laner would be presented in starched dresses with her hair arranged in perfect ringlets, performing recitations of poetry with mechanical precision, while visitors remarked on her peculiar charm. Such an unusual child, they would whisper behind lace fans so composed for her years. None dared mention the curse in polite company, though every invitation accepted to Magnolia House came with the morbid fascination of those who count the days of a terminal patient. In the library, Cornelius discovered a previously overlooked journal belonging to his great-grandfather, Jonathan Harvine, hidden within a false compartment of an escort. The yellowed pages contained entries that chilled his blood. October 3, 1812. I have at last traced the origin of our family's burden to its source. The Creole woman was not merely displaced from her land, as family legend suggests. She was with child by my grandfather when he claimed her property through legal chicanery. In her despair, she cast herself into the well that now serves our household, her unborn child perishing with her. Her final words, recorded by a house slave who witnessed the tragedy, haunt me. As you have taken my firstborn, so shall all your firstborns be taken, until 13 generations have paid the debt, or until one among them chooses to remain with us willingly. I fear we have completed but 6 generations of this grim sentence. Eliza found Eleanor one midnight standing motionless beside this same well, which still provided water for the kitchen house. The child's nightgown billowed slightly, though no breeze stirred the heavy air. "Do you hear them, mother?" Eleanor asked without turning. "They're singing beneath the water." "Who sings, my darling?" Eliza whispered, afraid to approach, yet more afraid to leave her daughter alone in the darkness. "The waiting ones. They're teaching me their song, so I'll recognize it when my time comes." Eleanor finally turned, her face serene in the moonlight. "There's a choice, you know." Abigail and William didn't understand, but I do. "What choice, Ella Laner?" Eliza's voice trembled. Whether to die as they did, the child's voice remained unervingly calm, or to join them willingly when the 13th year comes. Eleanor's 10th year arrived with a summer drought that withered the sugars and turned the Mississippis edges to cracked mud. The plantation's productivity suffered, forcing Cornelius to dismiss 3 field hands and reduce Thornfield's stipend. Though the scientist refused to abandon his observation of the Harvine child, the parched landscape seemed to mirror the growing tension within Magnolia House, where Ella Laner's presence had become a constant source of unease. The girl's bedroom window faced westward toward the family cemetery, and in the furnace heat of late afternoon, she would sit for hours watching the sun cast lengthening shadows across the weathered stones. Her sketchbook filled with drawings not of dolls or flowers, but intricate renderings of the cemetery's row iron gate, each curlic and Feeney Neal captured with unsettling precision. "She's communicating with them," Matilda confided to Josephine one evening as they prepared supper in the stifling kitchen house. "I've seen her lips moving, though no sound comes out. And sometimes when I pass the cemetery at dusk, I hear childish laughter among the graves. Though no living child plays there." Josephine crossed herself, adding another pinch of protective herbs to the evening's cornbread. 3 more years, she murmured. Just 3 more years to break the chain. In his private study, Cornelius had begun corresponding with an occultist from New Orleans, a woman of mixed heritage who claimed expertise in generational curses. Her letters, written in an elegant hand on paper scented with vetiver, suggested a ritual of substitution might satisfy the vengeful spirits, an offering of significant value in place of the 13th firstborn. The original debt was a life for a life, she wrote. Perhaps another exchange might balance the scales without demanding Eleanor's blood. Eliza discovered these letters and confronted her husband beneath the moss-draped oak that centered their garden. The afternoon heat had driven most living creatures to seek shelter, leaving them alone in the shimmering air. "You would traffic with spiritualists now?" she demanded, her voice tight with restrained fury. "After all your scientific inquiries and rational approaches," Cornelius's face had aged a decade in the past 10 years. Lines etched deeply around eyes that rarely found peaceful sleep. "I would traffic with the devil himself if it would save our daughter." That night, Eleanor appeared at the foot of her parents' bed, her thin white nightgown ghostly in the darkness. Neither Cornelius nor Eliza had heard her enter. Yet suddenly she stood there, amber-green eyes reflecting what little moonlight filtered through the shutters. "I found something today," she announced, her voice unnaturally composed. In her outstretched palm lay a tarnished silver locket, its chain broken and green with age. It was buried beneath the oldest magnolia tree, where the roots have started to surface. Cornelius recognized it immediately. The portrait locket that had belonged to his great-grandmother, said to contain a lock of hair from each firstborn child. It had been buried with his grandfather's sister, another 13-year-old casualty of the family curse. "The ground is giving back what it took," Eleanor explained as if reciting a lesson. "They say it's nearly time for the circle to complete itself." On the morning of Eleanor's 11th birthday, a package arrived from Paris, wrapped in brown paper and secured with wax seals bearing an unfamiliar crest. The parcel had been addressed to Cornelius Harvine in a spidery hand, but it was Eleanor who appeared in the foyer the moment the delivery boy's footsteps faded from the porch steps. "It's for me," she said simply, reaching for the package before her father could object. Inside lay a leather-bound tome entitled Line Maudit Unatologue de Malediction Familial, published in 1798. The book fell open naturally to a chapter detailing the Harvine curse, though the family name appeared in its original French spelling, Harvin. Cornelius palled as he scanned the yellowed pages, which contained information about his ancestors that he had never encountered in any family record. The text revealed that Maurice Harvine, the first to arrive in Louisiana in 1736, had not merely displaced a Creole woman, as family legend suggested. She had been a practicing mambo named Celestine Laveau, distant relation to the more famous Marie Laveau of New Orleans. Maurice had seduced Celestine to learn the location of a rumored treasure on her ancestral lands, then used his influence with colonial authorities to claim legal ownership once she revealed it. The debt of 13 generations, read one passage, signifies the 13 lunar months of a year. A complete cycle must pass before balance is restored. Each firstborn serves as tribute, one monthly payment to the spirits who guard the original bloodline. That evening, as the household prepared for Eleanor's modest birthday celebration, Dr. Thornfield cornered Cornelius in the library. The scientist's appearance had deteriorated markedly. His once precise attire now hung loosely on his frame, and his spectacles sat askew on his gaunt face. "I've been comparing the recorded symptoms of all previous Harvine firstborns," he whispered, glancing nervously at the doorway. Each developed unique manifestations, but all followed a similar progression. The most troubling aspect is that Eleanor's development mimics not one, but all previous cases combined. He spread his notes across the mahogany desk, meticulous charts tracking every Harvine firstborn's decline. William became obsessed with timepieces before his death, while Abigail collected bones and feathers. Your great-uncle Jonathan drew countless pictures of doors that existed nowhere on the property, while your father's sister heard voices in the well. Eleanor exhibits all these behaviors simultaneously, as if she is not just the 13th sacrifice, but the culmination of all who came before. A commotion from the parlor interrupted their conversation. Eleanor's voice raised in song, though not any melody taught by her music instructor. The Louisiana State Archives would later preserve this haunting tune in a collection of regional folklore, listing it as the Harvine lullaby with the notation origin unknown. Believed to predate European settlement, lyrics contain elements of French, Spanish, and Choctaw languages. The household staff reported that Eleanor sang this melody only when alone. Yet somehow all 13 verses were transcribed in Thornfield's journal, complete with annotations describing the curious physical response exhibited by listeners, an involuntary swaying as if rocked by unseen hands, accompanied by an overwhelming drowsiness that made it difficult to leave the vicinity of the singing child. As Eleanor's 12th year commenced, the plantation bore witness to meteorological anomalies that defied explanation. From the vacant soil where sugarcane should have flourished, strange fungi emerged overnight. Pale bulbous growths arranged in perfect circles that the field hands refused to disturb. The Mississippi flowed backward for 3 consecutive mornings, a phenomenon documented by bewildered riverboat captains in their logs. Migrating birds altered their ancient flight paths to avoid passing over Magnolia House, creating a peculiar negative space in the autumn sky, a void where wings feared to venture. Thornfield's scientific instruments began to malfunction in Eleanor's presence. Mercury thermometers shattered, though no one had touched them. Compass needles spun in frantic circles when she entered a room. Barometric readings plummeted to impossible depths that would have indicated an atmospheric pressure capable of crushing human lungs. "The boundary thins," Eleanor remarked casually over breakfast one December morning, spreading marmalade on her toast with methodical precision. Like tissue paper held before a candle, the lights from both sides showing through. That night, Eliza discovered her daughter's bed empty, the sheets arranged in a nest-like configuration with the silver locket placed precisely in its center. Panic propelled her through the moonlit corridors, her nightgown billowing behind her like a spectral pursuer. She found Eleanor standing before the ornatelle looking glass in the disused ballroom, conversing with her reflection as one might chat with a dear friend across a garden fence. Most disturbing was that the reflection moved independently, gesturing with different hands than Eleanor raised, its lips forming words a half-second before the living child spoke them. "Must be a willing sacrifice," Eliza heard as she approached. "Only then can the circle close properly." The reflection noticed Eliza first, its amber-green eyes widening in recognition before Eleanor herself turned. "Mother," the girl acknowledged with unnatural composure. "We were just discussing the ceremony." "We," Eliza whispered, though she dared not approach the mirror. "The 12 who came before. They've each taken a month to teach me what I must know." Eleanor gestured to the reflection, which now displayed not her image, but a shimmering collage of childish faces, some in antiquated dress, others in more recent fashions, all bearing the unmistakable Harvine features. May was William, June was Abigail, July was Thomas. From 1798, Cornelius discovered his great-grandfather's journal had acquired new entries, the ink still damp on pages previously blank, written in a childish hand that nonetheless formed perfect copperplate script. "The 13th shall be both sacrifice and savior. Through willing surrender comes redemption. The circle closes where it began, at the bottom of the well, where first blood was spilled." From beyond the plantation's boundaries came no respite. The parish priest refused further visits to Magnolia House, claiming an urgent mission elsewhere, though whispers in town suggested he had witnessed the communion wafer bleed when placed upon Eleanor's tongue. The conjure woman who supplied Matilda with protective herbs was found wandering the cypress swamp. Her mind fractured, repeating only, "The water rises, the water rises." The 13th month of Eleanor's 12th year arrived with an unseasonable frost that painted the magnolia leaves with silver filigree. The calendar insisted it was August. Yet the gardener discovered frost patterns on the south-facing windows, delicate crystalline structures that upon closer inspection revealed themselves to be miniature renderings of the Harvine family tree, complete with names and dates that no living person had taught Eleanor. Thornfield no longer slept. Dark hollows beneath his eyes testified to nights spent transcribing the increasing anomalies, his scientific vocabulary gradually giving way to terminology borrowed from medieval demonology and Haitian Vdan. His correspondence with academic colleagues had ceased entirely. The last letter he received from Harvard bore a tour note suggesting a period of rest at a cubrious mountain retreat known for treating nervous exhaustion. The convergence accelerates, he muttered to Cornelius one evening as they watched Eleanor methodically arranging 13 white candles in the parlor. She exists simultaneously in multiple states like Schrodinger's theoretical cat, both sacrifice and savior, both dead and alive. In the kitchen house, Josephine discovered that food prepared for Eleanor transmuted overnight. Fresh bread developed mold that formed perfect simulacra of human faces in profile. Sliced apples rearranged their seeds into unrecognizable alphabets. Water in Eleanor's designated drinking glass separated into distinct layers of different density, creating a perfect spectrum when light passed through it. Eliza took to carrying a small silver scissors in her pocket, obsessively collecting locks of Eleanor's hair, as if preserving physical evidence of her daughter's existence. These auburn strands, stored in labeled envelopes within her walnut writing desk, would later provide 19th century scientists with material for one of the earliest documented cases of genetic anomaly. For when examined under sufficient magnification, Eleanor's hair revealed a double helix structure unlike any human pattern previously recorded. The night Eleanor turned 12 and a half, precisely halfway through her 13th year. Every timepiece in Magnolia House synchronized to the same incorrect hour, 1300 hours, the grandfather clock in the foyer chimed 13 times, its mechanism inexplicably altered. Pocket watches and bedside chronometers displayed impossible configurations of their hands, yet continued marking time with perfect precision. 6 months remaining, Eleanor announced at breakfast, methodically dissecting a soft-boiled egg whose yolk had hardened into a perfect sphere. The key begins to turn in the lock. That evening, as twilight painted the plantation in shades of indigo and amber, Cornelius found himself drawn to the family cemetery. There, arranged in a perfect circle, among the graves of the 12 firstborn Harvines, stood 13 empty chairs, 12 sized for children of various ages, and one adult chair that he recognized from his own study. The chairs faced inward, as if arranged for an intimate conference, though no living person had placed them there. At the center of the circle lay a freshly dug hole, too small for a grave, yet too precisely shaped to be the work of animal or accident. From this depression, visible only when the setting sun struck it at precisely the right angle, rose a thin column of mist that tasted of well water when the breeze carried it to Cornelius's lips. Eleanor's 13th birthday dawned with unnatural stillness. The morning light filtered through a peculiar haze that hung over Magnolia House. Neither fog nor smoke, but something in between, a veil between worlds growing increasingly diaphous. The household staff moved through their duties with the solemn gravity of funeral attendants, their whispers dying whenever footsteps approached. In the study, Cornelius discovered that the locked drawer where he kept his most private correspondence had been opened, though the key remained in his waistcoat pocket. Inside, arranged with mathematical precision, lay 13 objects he recognized with mounting horror. A child's tooth wrapped in silk, Abigail's first, lost in 1873. A brass button from William's christening gown. A tiny thimble that had belonged to his great-aunt Catherine before her 13th birthday in 1835. Items that should have been scattered across generations, some buried in coffins long decayed, others locked in family vaults or lost to time, all gathered as if for inspection. At the center lay a folded piece of parchment in Eleanor's meticulous handwriting. They have shown me where the collector keeps their treasures. Each tribute serves as anchor to this world. When midnight strikes on my 13th birthday, I shall take these anchors with me into the well. The circle requires completion. Prepare the ceremony as great-grandfather described in the hidden pages. Do not mourn what transforms rather than perishes. Thornfield, summoned to examine these artifacts, handled each with trembling fingers. His scientific demeanor had long since abandoned him, replaced by the wide-eyed apprehension of a man confronting forces beyond rational explanation. These objects contain residual energy, he murmured, passing a pocket spectroscope over the collection. If I were still a man of science alone, I would say they emit radiation of an unknown frequency. But I have witnessed too much in this house to maintain such pretenses. Late that afternoon, While searching Eleanor's room for any clue that might disrupt the approaching culmination, Eliza discovered a journal hidden beneath a loose floorboard. Unlike her daughter's previous writings, this volume contained entries written in 13 distinct hands, each one recognizable as belonging to a previous Harvine firstborn. The final entry dated that very day, though inscribed in faded ink that appeared centuries old, sent ice through her veins. The 13th completes what the first began. Celestine's unborn child would have been the first of 13 generations. When Maurice cast her into the well, he severed a bloodline that should have flourished alongside his own. The waters have preserved her justice all these years, waiting for the 13th child to make willing amends. Eleanor understands what we could not. There is neither death nor salvation, but transformation. The circle must be unbroken. As dusk gathered, Eleanor appeared at dinner wearing a white dress none had seen before, its style reminiscent of garments worn a century prior. Around her neck hung 13 lockets, each containing a portrait miniature of a Harvine firstborn. Her amber-green eyes reflected candlelight with unnerving intensity, and her copper hair seemed to float slightly, as if suspended in water, though no breeze stirred the heavy air. Tonight, she announced to her ashen-faced parents, "You will witness what generations of Harvines have prepared for. The debt will be settled, not with death, but with reunion." The hour of midnight approached with the inexorability of fate, each tick of the altered clocks resonating through Magnolia House like a funeral bell. Eleanor stood at the edge of the ancient well behind the kitchen house, the silver moonlight transforming her white dress into a luminous shroud. Around her, 13 candles formed a perfect circle, their flames burning unnaturally still despite the rising night wind that moaned through the live oaks. Cornelius and Eliza watched from a distance, their bodies frozen in a paralysis, not entirely of their own making. Dr. Thornfield scribbled frantically in his final journal, the pages whipping in the spectral breeze that somehow left the candle flames untouched. "The conjunction occurs at 13 minutes past midnight," Eleanor explained, her voice carrying with unnatural clarity. "When the moon aligns perfectly above the well, the same position it held when Celestine and her unborn child were sacrificed 136 years ago." From the family cemetery came an impossible sound, the creak of hinges long rusted, the soft slide of earth being displaced. Matilda, watching from the kitchen window, crossed herself repeatedly as she witnessed 12 small figures emerge from among the gravestones, walking with solemn purpose toward the well. They cast no shadows in the moonlight, these spectral children in clothing from different eras, yet their faces all bore the unmistakable Harvine features. Inside the house, the grandfather clock began to chime, though no one stood near enough to hear it. 1, 2, 13 sonorous notes that vibrated through the foundations of the plantation. Eleanor smiled as she untied a velvet pouch from her waist, emptying its contents into her palm. 13 locks of hair, 12 collected from previous generations, and 1 cut from her own head that very evening. "The original sin was theft," she said, her voice now layered with other childish voices that seemed to emerge from the depths of the well. "Land stolen, life stolen, bloodlines severed. The price was 13 generations of separation. The remedy is willing reunion." From her pocket, Eliza withdrew an aged journal page discovered only hours earlier in the false bottom of the family Bible. The final confession of Maurice Arvin, written in fading French on his deathbed in 1754. "I confess my greatest sin was not the taking of Celestine's land, nor even her life, but the denial of my own blood. The child she carried was mine, and in my cowardice and greed, I murdered not only my lover, but my firstborn. The curse that now plagues my line is not hers but my own, the guilt that flows through our veins until atonement is made." Eleanor stepped onto the stone lip of the well, her body swaying slightly as if already feeling the pull of the waters below. The 12 spectral children formed a semicircle behind her, their translucent hands linked in silent communion. "The 13th child must choose," Eleanor said, her voice now entirely her own again. "Death unwilling, as the 12 before me suffered, or transformation willing, to complete the circle and release both bloodlines from their century of separation." The water at the bottom of the well, untouched by moonlight for generations, began to glow with an opalescent radiance that illuminated Ella from below, casting her features in an unearthly light that revealed, for the briefest moment, another face superimposed upon her own, the serene countenance of a Creole woman with Eleanor's amber-green eyes. As the 13th clock chime faded into the whispering night, Ella cast the 13 locks of hair into the glowing well, each strand spiraling downward like copper filaments drawn to a magnet. The water below hissed and bubbled, releasing a luminous vapor that twisted upward in a double helix, enveloping her small figure in gossamer light. "I choose willing transformation," Eleanor declared, her voice resonating with sudden authority that belied her 13 years, not as sacrifice, but as restoration. From the shadows near the kitchen house emerged Josephine and Matilda, their aged faces solemn as they took positions at precise points around the well. They had known this moment would come, had perhaps always known through generations of whispered wisdom passed from servant to servant while Harvine firstborns perished. "The blood calls to blood," Matilda inned, removing from her pocket a small object wrapped in indigo cloth, a tarnished silver spoon that had been Celestine's only possession saved from the well. "What was divided shall be rejoined." Eleanor extended her palm, and Matilda placed the spoon in it. The metal grew incandescent at her touch, melting and reforming around her wrist as a bracelet of liquid silver. Cornelius struggled against the supernatural paralysis binding, him managing only to extend one trembling hand toward his daughter. "Eleanor," he gasped. "Please, father," she replied with gentle finality. "This was always my purpose, not to die as the others did, but to restore what was broken." The spectral children moved closer, their translucent forms becoming more substantial with each step toward the well, their eyes, all bearing the same amber-green hue that had marked Ella since birth, fixed not on the living girl, but on something visible only to them in the glowing depths below. Thornfield's scientific instruments, arranged in a semicircle on a nearby table, began to register impossible readings. The barometer needle spun past all calibrated measurements. Thermometers simultaneously recorded temperatures below freezing and above boiling. His prized electrometer discharged visible arcs of blue-white energy that jumped between metal components. "The veil parts," Ella announced as the moonlight intensified, focusing like a lens above the well. "I go to claim my birthright, not as a Harvine alone, but as a daughter of both bloodlines." With graceful deliberation, she stepped from the well's edge, not falling, but descending as if the air itself had transformed to water. The 12 spectral children followed, their forms dissolving into streams of phosphorescent mist that spiraled around Eleanor's descending figure. From the depths of the well rose a woman's form, composed entirely of glowing water, arms outstretched in welcome. Celestine's features, preserved in the timeless depths, smiled upon the girl who carried both her blood and that of the man who had betrayed her. "The circle closes," Eliza whispered, understanding at last, "not with death but with reunion." As Eleanor's copper hair disappeared beneath the surface, the plantation itself seemed to exhale. The unnatural frost vanished from the magnolia leaves. The strange fungi retreated into the soil, and the 13 candles extinguished simultaneously, leaving only moonlight to illuminate the scene of profound transformation. The waters that had claimed Ella refused to settle in the days that followed, rippling with an interior light that neither waned with the moon nor brightened with the sun. A perpetual twilight seemed to hover over Magnolia House, as though time itself hesitated between yesterday and tomorrow. Unwilling to proceed into a future where 13 generations of sorrow had found their resolution, Cornelius found himself returning to the well at odd hours, drawn by whispers that seemed to float upward like bubbles breaking the surface. Sometimes he caught fragments of childish laughter, sometimes the gentle humming of a Creole lullaby, but never his daughter's distinct voice among them. In his waistcoat pocket, he carried the silver spoon that had transformed into a bracelet, and then returned to its original form, discovered on the well's edge the morning after Eleanor's descent, yet bearing the unmistakable imprint of a small wrist upon its malleable surface. "She is neither gone nor present," Thornfield concluded as he packed his scientific instruments, their mechanisms now functioning normally, though permanently altered. The compass that always pointed to the well instead of north. The thermometer that registered the precise temperature of a human body regardless of ambient conditions. Ella exists in what I can only describe as a liminal state, the theoretical space where quantum possibilities converge. The scientist's rational vocabulary had been humbled by what he had witnessed. His forthcoming monograph destined to be rejected by every academic publication and eventually preserved only in the private collection of a New Orleans antiquarian with particular interest in metaphysical anomalies. Eliza took to sleeping in the nursery, the room Ella had inhabited for 13 years. The porcelain dolls, once arranged by her daughter in concentric circles facing the window, now turned themselves toward the door. Each night, regardless of how Eliza positioned them before retiring. The rocking horse moved imperceptibly during the darkest hours, the indentations of its runners advancing across the cypress floorboards by morning, always pointing toward the family cemetery where 12 graves now lay empty, their headstones intact, but the earth beneath them undisturbed for the first time since their interment. Most peculiar was the sudden fertility of the plantation soil, which had languished in mediocrity for generations. Sugarcane grew to impossible heights, its sweetness so concentrated that mill workers reported crystallized sugar forming spontaneously in the crushed juice. Gardenas and magnolia bloomed out of season, their fragrance so intoxicating that visitors found themselves overcome with inexplicable memories of childhood joys they had never actually experienced. The household staff whispered of seeing a young girl in a white dress walking among the cane fields at dusk, sometimes alone, sometimes accompanied by 12 shadow children. Josephine claimed to have glimpsed Celestine herself standing at the edge of the property where it met the swamp, her spectral form beckoning not in threat, but in recognition. One drove one mother acknowledging another across the divide that separated their worlds. The debt is paid, Matilda declared one evening, as she placed a bowl of magnolia petals floating in well water on Eleanor's vacant bedside table. But the connection remains. The Harvine blood and Celestine's blood now flow together through the veins of this land, nourishing what was once poisoned by separation. The revelation of Eleanor's transformation reverberated beyond Magnolia House, sending ripples through the parish that would persist for generations. The story of the Harvine curse and its resolution became inextricably woven into the folklore of St. Francisville, passed down in hushed tones during velvet evenings on wraparound porches, embellished with each telling yet never straying from its essential truth. 3 years after Ella descended into the well, Cornelius Harvine passed from this world during a thunderstorm of unusual ferocity. Witnesses claimed lightning struck the ancient oak 13 times in succession, each bolt illuminating the plantation in brilliant blue-white clarity that revealed for fleeting moments the figures of 13 children dancing hand in hand around the well. Cornelius was discovered the following morning in his study, his expression one of profound peace. A silver locket containing copper hair clasped in his rigored fingers. Eliza outlived her husband by 17 years, maintaining Magnolia House with quiet dignity. She never remarried nor bore another child, becoming instead a patroness of local orphans with particular attention to girls with copper hair. Each year on the anniversary of Eleanor's transformation, she would host a curious ceremony that combined elements of Catholic ritual and practices whispered to have originated in Sandom. Local society tolerated these eccentricities with the difference accorded to profound grief. Though few understood that Eliza's annual observances were not acts of mourning but of communion. The plantation ledgers from this period document an agricultural phenomenon that defied contemporary science. Crops planted in accordance with the 13-month lunar calendar that Eliza instituted yielded harvests of such abundance that Magnolia House regained its former prosperity despite employing fewer hands. The sugar produced from its cane commanded premium prices in New Orleans markets, sought after for its distinctive flavor that one French confectioner described as reminiscent of childhood memories one never actually lived. Most remarkable were the children born on plantation lands following Eleanor's descent. Parish birth records note an unusual prevalence of amber-green eyes among infants of diverse parentage. Regardless of their progenitors' eye color, these children demonstrated peculiar affinities, an intuitive understanding of the relationship between lunar phases and plant growth, an ability to locate underground water sources without divining rods, and a tendency to sing fragments of an unrecognizable lullaby while engaged in solitary play. Thornfield's final academic contribution before his withdrawal from scientific society was a monograph entitled Hereditary Transmission of Acquired Metaphysical Characteristics, in which he postulated that Elalaner's transformation had altered the very soil of Magnolia House, imprinting it with genetic information that now expressed itself through subsequent generations born upon that land. The document, dismissed by his contemporaries as the product of a mind unhinged by tropical fever, would be rediscovered in 1967 by researchers investigating epigenetic responses to environmental catalysts. The well itself became an object of quiet veneration. Never filled or covered, it remained a living presence on the property, its waters neither rising during floods nor diminishing during droughts. Those who leaned over its stone rim and whispered the name Eleanor on the 13th day of any month would sometimes hear, carried up from fathomless depths, the gentle laughter of a child who had chosen transformation over extinction, reunion over division, and in doing so had healed a wound carved into the land itself. The night watchman at the Louisiana State Archives never reported what he witnessed at precisely 13 minutes past midnight on the centennial of Eleanor's descent. Those who found him the following morning described a man transformed by terror. His hair turned white, his capacity for speech reduced to repetitive murmurs about documents that write themselves and ink that flows upstream. What can be verified is that the Harvine Family Bible, donated to the archives in 1923, was discovered open to a previously blank page, now filled with 13 signatures, and 13 distinct hands. The paper had been analyzed by forensic specialists who confirmed the unprecedented phenomenon of 13 different ink compounds, each corresponding to the chemical composition of writing materials from their respective eras, all somehow applied to the parchment simultaneously during the night in question. Magnolia House itself endured into the modern age, though ownership passed from the Harvine line after Eliza's death. Subsequent residents reported curious phenomena that defied conventional explanation. Children born in the master bedroom invariably arrived at 13 minutes past the hour, regardless of labor duration. Gardeners discovered perfect circles of white mushrooms emerging on the 13th of each month, always with 13 fungi precisely spaced, always at locations where Elalaner had been documented standing during her 13th year. Most compelling were the consistent reports of well water that, when collected during a waning gibbous moon, exhibited properties no laboratory could identify. The liquid maintained its temperature regardless of environmental conditions, rejected any attempt to introduce contaminants, and when used to nurture plants, produced blooms of unprecedented vibrancy that lasted weeks beyond their natural cycle. Anthropologists from Tulane University, who studied the regional folklore surrounding the Harvine transformation, identified a peculiar linguistic anomaly. While most supernatural tales degrade into simplified narratives over generations, the Eleanor story demonstrated the opposite pattern, each telling becoming more linguistically complex, incorporating precise details that narrators could not possibly have known, as if the story itself were evolving independently of its human vessels. In the parish records of St. Francisville, 13 children born across 13 decades following Elalaner's transformation were documented as speaking their first words on their first birthdays, each uttering the same phrase, "The circle holds." These children, tracked through meticulous genealogical research, revealed no direct biological connection to each other or to the Harvine bloodline. Yet all possessed the distinctive amber-green eyes that had marked Eleanor from birth. Perhaps most disking was the discovery made during the restoration of Magnolia House in 1987. Workers removing layers of wallpaper in the nursery uncovered a mural painted directly on the plaster beneath. 13 children holding hands in a circle around a well, their features rendered with photographic precision despite the artwork predating photography itself. At the center stood a figure with Eleanor's face, but Celestine's clothing, her expression conveying not tragedy but transcendence, her outstretched hand offering what appeared to be a silver spoon to whoever might reach through the dimensional veil to accept it. The moonless night enveloped Magnolia House in impenetrable darkness, save for the spectral glow emanating from the well, a luminescence that pulsed with the rhythm of a beating heart. Elalaner stood barefoot upon the mossy stones, her white nightgown billowing through no breeze stirred the oppressive Louisiana air. Behind her, 12 translucent figures arranged themselves in perfect formation, their features bearing the unmistakable Harvine countenance despite spanning 7 generations. "The hour arrives," Eleanor whispered, her voice carrying the timbre of both child and ancient. 13 generations of separation must end tonight. From the shadows emerged Cornelius and Eliza, their faces etched with the peculiar resignation of parents who had battled fate for 13 years, only to recognize its implacable design. Dr. Thornfield followed at a respectful distance, his scientific instruments abandoned in favor of the simple witness of human eyes, the final concession of rational mind to transcendent mystery. Eleanor extended her palms skyward as the clouds parted, revealing not stars but 13 celestial points of amber-green light, mirroring the exact configuration of Harvine graves in the family cemetery. The air above the well began to shimmer with an opalescent quality like heat rising from sun-baked stones, yet carrying the unmistakable chill of centuries-old water. "I have seen what awaits," Eleanor announced, her eyes reflecting the otherworldly illumination rising from the depths. Not oblivion, but reconciliation. Not death, but transformation. From the well ascended a column of water that defied gravity's dominion, twisting upward like a translucent serpent before resolving into the unmistakable silhouette of a woman with child, Celestine Lavo, her features serene yet resolute, one hand extended toward Eleanor in silent invitation. "The 13th month of the 13th year completes what the first began," Eleanor continued, each word resonating with the collective voice of 12 generations. "Maurice severed 2 bloodlines that were destined to flow as one. The waters have preserved this truth, waiting for one who would understand that curse and blessing are merely perspectives separated by time." The spectral children moved in perfect synchronicity, forming a living chain that connected Eleanor to each ancestral grave. Through this gossamer linkage flowed visible energy, copper-hued and luminous, carrying the essence of each shortened life toward its resolution. Eliza stepped forward despite herself maternal instinct overriding supernatural paralysis. "Eleanor, please." "Mother," Eleanor interrupted with gentle finality, "I was never merely your daughter. I am the vessel through which 13 generations find their voice, the bridge between divided bloodlines, the willing sacrifice that transforms curse to consecration." With these words, she removed from her pocket 13 objects, small tokens taken from each Harvine firstborn's possessions. A silver thimble, a carved wooden horse, a glass marble clouded. With age, a porcelain doll's eye, each item humming with invisible significance. She cast them into the well with ceremonial precision, each creating concentric rings that expanded outward in perfect 13-fold symmetry. The watery apparition of Celestine enveloped Eleanor in an embrace that transcended physical contact, their forms merging like watercolors bleeding into parchment. For one breathtaking moment, mother and father beheld their daughter suspended between worlds, her copper hair floating as if underwater, her amber-green eyes simultaneously reflecting both mortal fear and transcendent understanding, her small figure both dissolving and coalescing in the same impossible instant. Then, with neither sound nor struggle, Eleanor Harvine completed her transformation, not through destruction, but through sublime integration. The 13th sacrifice becoming the first restoration as water and flesh, curse and blessing. Past and future merged into a single point of light that illuminated the truth hidden at the bottom of the well. For 136 years, pilgrims arrive in St. Francisville each autumn when the light adopts that particular amber-green quality unique to Louisiana October. They come bearing offerings of silver spoons and copper trinkets which accumulate around the moss-covered well until the caretakers of what was once Magnolia House remove them under cover of darkness, only for more to appear by morning light. Science has offered various explanations for the curious properties of this place: unusual mineral concentrations in the soil, rare microorganisms in the groundwater, even electromagnetic peculiarities that might account for the gentle humming visitors report when placing their palms against the ancient stones. Yet, these rational postulations wither like cut flowers in the presence of what locals know as Eleanor's legacy. The university research team that recorded 13 distinct female voices emanating from the well during their overnight study packed their equipment with trembling hands. their digital recordings demonstrating what their technical report would later describe as harmonic anomalies inconsistent with known acoustic principles. Their sensors detected water temperatures that fluctuated in precise 13-minute cycles, measurements that corresponded exactly with lunar positions calculated from 1872. Perhaps most compelling are the 13 children born across 3 parishes since that transformation night, each arriving during a 13th hour, each bearing amber-green eyes regardless of parental genetics. These children, now gathered annually by descendants of Eliza Harvine's Orphan Foundation, demonstrate remarkable abilities. Hands that heal when immersed in water, voices that harmonize in languages never taught, fingers that trace patterns in soil, revealing underground streams that no geological survey has mapped. The last direct Harvine descendant, a professor of cultural anthropology specializing in generational trauma, maintains meticulous records of what she terms echoes of reconciliation. Her research catalogs instances where bitterland disputes in the parish resolved inexplicably on the 13th day of lunar months, where feuding families found themselves drawn to the well during gibbous moons and departed with centuries of acrimony dissolved like sugar and hot water. Most striking are the changed relationship between the land and those who work it. The plantation system that once extracted brutal human capital from Louisiana soil has transformed through generations into communal agricultural projects where descendants of both enslaved and enslavers collaborate with unprecedented harmony. The harvests from fields surrounding the former Magnolia House yield crops of such abundance that participating families have established a foundation providing sustenance to communities throughout the region. Thornfield's journals, finally published in their entirety 100 years after his death, conclude with what historians now recognize as prophetic insight. The transformation of Eleanor Harvine represents not an ending, but a beginning. The first instance of evolutionary adaptation to metaphysical forces we have yet to comprehend. Future generations will recognize this event not as supernatural aberration but as natural progression. The moment when human consciousness breached the artificial boundaries, separating physical existence from its more profound counterpart. And still, on nights when the moon hangs at precisely the angle it held during Eleanor's descent, visitors to the well report, seeing copper-haired children dancing among the sugars, their laughter carrying across centuries, their hands extended in welcome to any who might recognize that some curses are merely blessings waiting for the courage of willing transformation. Along the banks of the Mississippi, the story of Eleanor Harvey's transformation has metamorphosed from local legend into something far more profound. A parable of reconciliation that resonates through the collective unconscious of St. Francisville with the persistence of a half-remembered dream. Each generation adds their own interpretations to this chronicle of willing sacrifice, embroidering the narrative with threads pulled from their own understanding of what divides and unites bloodlines. Anthropologists studying the region's folklore have identified a curious pattern in how the Harvine story transmits itself. Unlike typical ghost stories that degrade into simplistic morality tales, Eleanor's saga grows more nuanced with each telling. Modern renditions incorporate precise historical details narrators could not possibly have learned through conventional means, as if the story itself were a living entity that selects its vessels with deliberate care. The transformation's metaphysical implications have drawn theologians and philosophers to the former plantation grounds. Their academic treatises attempting to capture in clinical language what the locals express through ritual and observance. One Jesuit scholar's monograph, Willing Sacrifice. Redemptive transformation in the Harvine narrative postulates that Eleanor's choice represents the ultimate reconciliation between opposing cosmic forces. A child born of division who became the instrument of reunification. Most compelling are the sociological changes observed in the 3 parishes surrounding Magnolia House. Communities once rigidly stratified by race and class have gradually evolved toward integration with an organic quality absent in other southern regions. Marriages between families historically separated by prejudice or ancient grudges occur with statistical significance precisely 13 generations after the original divisions formed, as if some invisible ledger of human connection were being methodically balanced by unseen hands. Water drawn from the well when analyzed under quantum resonance imaging reveals molecular structures that simultaneously display patterns from both the present moment and 1872. A temporal impossibility that has forced revisions to fundamental principles of physics. These samples preserved in the university's specialized containment facilities constitute the only documented instance of matter existing in quantum superposition visible to the naked eye. Psychological studies conducted among residents who consume crops irrigated with this water report significantly higher instances of inherited memory. Vivid recollections of events experienced by ancestors rather than themselves. Children born after their parents participated in the annual harvest festivals describe with perfect accuracy the layout of Magnolia House before its 19th century renovations, sketching floor plans that match architectural drawings preserved only in sealed archives. Perhaps most profound is the linguistic evolution observed in the region. Phrases and syntactical structures unique to Salstein-Lavo's extinct Creole dialect have resurfaced in the everyday speech of St. Francisville residents with no genealogical connection to that lineage, as if the reconciliation of bloodlines had extended to the very language used to describe the world. Linguists document this phenomenon as memorial lexicon resurgence, though locals simply call it speaking with Eleanor's tongue. The integration of opposing forces, life and death, curse and blessing, separation and reunion, manifests not merely as supernatural folklore, but as living philosophy that has reshaped an entire region's understanding of how the past continues to flow through the present. Like water from an inexhaustible well, whose depths connect all who drink from its reconciling waters. Beyond the boundaries of St. Francisville, the tale of Eleanor Harvine's transformation ripples outward like concentric circles in a still pond, touching lives far removed from Louisiana's sultry embrace. Academics who journey to study the phenomenon depart changed, their scientific instruments malfunctioning yet suddenly capable of measuring forces previously deemed immeasurable. Their papers published in obscure journals speak of localizable temporal distortion and transgenerational epigenetic transmission. Scientific terms that circle but never quite touch the simple truth understood by every child born within 13 miles of the well. The plantation itself has undergone its own metamorphosis through the decades. What was once the bitter fruit of exploitation has blossomed into a sanctuary where reconciliation flourishes in unexpected forms. The Harvine Foundation, established from the proceeds of 13 unexpectedly bountiful harvests following Eleanor's descent, now operates as steward of the land. Its charter dedicated to healing divisions of blood and soil through willing transformation. Its board comprises 13 members drawn from families once separated by the chasm of master and enslaved. Their collaboration a living testament to Eleanor's final gift. Most remarkable are the dreams. Throughout the Mississippi Delta on the 13th night of each month, sleepers report identical visions of a copper-haired child leading 12 others through sugarcane fields that glow with internal luminescence. Dream researchers from 3 universities have documented over 700 consistent reports, the details matching with such precision that statistical probability of coincidence approaches mathematical impossibility. These shared nocturnal journeys always conclude at the well, where dreamers are invited to cast into the depths whatever divides them from their own reconciliation. Grudges carried through generations, wounds inflicted by history's cruelties, barriers erected between bloodlines that were destined to flow as one. Eleanor's legacy manifests most profoundly in unexpected moments of grace that defy rational explanation. The parish records document 13 cases of century-old land disputes resolving themselves when opposing parties simultaneously arrived at the courthouse bearing identical compromise proposals. Hospital archives note inexplicable healings of hereditary conditions when patients drink from silver spoons dipped in well water during the waning gibbous moon. Agricultural journals chronicle the emergence of hybrid plant species in perfectly circular formations on sites where Harvine firstborns breathed their last. The silver locket that once contained 13 locks of hair now resides in the St. Francisville Historical Society's climate-controlled vault, though curators report it mysteriously appears on the well's edge each year on the anniversary of Eleanor's descent, only to return to its display case by morning, bearing the unmistakable scent of magnolia blossoms, regardless of season. Those who place their hands upon the glass enclosure often withdraw them with a gasp, describing sensations of cool water flowing between their fingers, though the case remains perfectly dry. The archives of St. Francis Episcopal Church yielded an unexpected revelation when the ancient parish registry was removed for restoration in the autumn of 1967. Behind this leather-bound volume pressed flat against the wall of the iron safe where church records had been secured since antebellum days lay a water-stained envelope addressed in a spidery hand to whomever seeks the truth of Magnolia House. Inside, a confession penned by Father Tobito on his deathbed in 1885 revealed the terrible secret he had carried since that fateful night of Ella Laner's birth. May God forgive what I could not prevent nor amend. When summoned to baptize the 13th Harvine firstborn, I discovered in the family Bible what others had overlooked. The identical baptismal record of a child born to Celestine Lavo and Maurice Harvine, performed in secret by my predecessor 1 week before her tragic end. This child, unnamed but anointed, created an unbreakable sacred bond between bloodlines that subsequent generations sought to sever through denial. The curse was not Celestine's vengeance, but divine insistence that what God had joined through baptismal waters, no man should put us under. This revelation cast the entire saga in ethereal new light. Eleanor's transformation represented not merely reconciliation, but sacramental completion of a spiritual circuit left open for 13 generations. The well water's miraculous properties suddenly found theological context. It was not merely cursed, but consecrated. Each Harvine firstborn drawn to it through baptismal memory imprinted upon their very souls. Most illuminating was Father Tobito's description of what he witnessed in Eleanor's eyes during her christening. I saw reflected therein not one soul, but many, as if looking into a cathedral of mirrors, where the same candle flame multiplies into infinity. When I placed the holy water upon her brow, it did not drip downward, but seemed to flow into her very flesh, as if returning to a vessel designed specifically for its containment. The parish physician's records, discovered in the same archival excavation, documented a peculiar anatomical anomaly present in each Harvine firstborn. A small birthmark behind the left ear shaped precisely like the 17th century baptismal font from which the original Harvine Lavo child received its first and only sacrament. This physical manifestation of spiritual inheritance appeared in no other Harvine offspring, only the firstborn children marked for the well's embrace. Modern theologians have since reinterpreted Ella Laner's willing descent not as sacrifice but as liturgical completion. The 13th station in a generations-long ceremony of reconciliation that transformed curse to blessing through sacramental surrender. The water that continues to rise from the ancient well, unnaturally cool and sweet regardless of season, bears microscopic crystalline structures identical to those found in the baptismal font of St. Francis Episcopal. A chemical impossibility that suggests either miraculous transubstantiation or a subterranean connection between sacred spaces that transcends physical geography. Those who drink from both sources report the same distinctive taste, described variously as reminiscent of silver, sweet as forgiveness, and most tellingly like remembering something beautiful you never actually experienced. And on nearly stillness blankets the former Magnolia House property every 13th day of October, as though the very molecules of air remember Eleanor's transformation and hold their positions in reverent tableau. Even the most skeptical visitors find themselves speaking in hushed tones, their footsteps unconsciously lightening as they approach the ancient well whose stone rim has been worn smooth by generations of pilgrims seeking reconciliation. The most remarkable testament to Eleanor's legacy manifests in the genealogical anomalies documented by the Louisiana State University Department of Genetic Anthropology. Family bloodlines once severed by historical trauma have mysteriously reconnected through statistically improbable marriages, adoptions, and chance encounters that defy mathematical probability. Researchers have identified 13 distinct family networks that, when mapped across generations, form a perfect mirror image of the pattern Ella Laner traced in the soil on her final night among the living. Parish birth records reveal another inexplicable phenomenon. Since Ella Laner's descent, every 13th child born within 13 miles of the well exhibits a distinctive heterochromia. One eye the amber green that marked the Harvine firstborns, the other the deep obsidian that historical accounts attribute to Celestine Lavo. These children, regardless of racial heritage or social background, demonstrate remarkable linguistic facilities, often speaking archaic French Creole phrases as their first utterances before acquiring their parents' native tongue. The botanical transformation of the region continues to confound agricultural scientists. Flora surrounding the former plantation displays accelerated evolutionary adaptations, producing hybrid species that combine characteristics of plants documented in both Maurice Harvey's 18th century horticultural journals and ethnobotanical records of medicinal herbs used by Celestine's ancestors. Most notable is the Magnolia reconciliatrix, a previously undocumented magnolia variant whose blossoms remain viable for 13 days after cutting, and whose crushed petals, when steeped in well water, produce a tea that local physicians quietly prescribe for ailments resistant to conventional medicine. Most profound are the psychological effects reported by those who maintain regular contact with the well. Trauma therapists have documented cases of generational healing. Descendants of both enslaved people and enslavers experiencing spontaneous resolution of inherited psychological wounds after participating in the annual reconciliation ceremony established by Eliza before her death. Participants describe sensations of memories rearranging themselves like furniture in a familiar room and ancient knots of familiar pain gently untangling without losing their instructive essence. The ripples of Elelaner's transformation extend beyond metaphysical realms into tangible social restructuring. The 13 parishes surrounding Street Francisville have gradually established governance models that incorporate both traditional democratic processes and indigenous consensus practices that predated European settlement. Land ownership, once the literal and figurative foundation of inequality, has evolved towards stewardship models where ancestral claims are honored through collaborative cultivation rather than exclusive possession. In the quietest hours before dawn, when mist rises from the Mississippi to envelop Magnolia House in diaphanous embrace, caretakers report hearing 13-note melodies that seem to emerge from the soil itself. A subtle harmonic reminder that beneath apparent divisions lie connections as inevitable as water finding its level, as patient as roots seeking nourishment, as transformative as a child who understood that some sacrifices are actually doors opening to profound reunion. The final revelation came not through scholarly investigation or scientific inquiry, but through the innocent hands of a child. On the 150th anniversary of Elelaner's transformation, as autumn shadows lengthened across Magnolia House, 13-year-old Celeste Morgan, a descendant of neither Harvine nor Lavo by blood, yet bearing the telltale amber-green heterochromia, discovered a hidden compartment beneath the ancient well's stone rim. Within this secret repository lay a small journal bound in weathered leather, its pages preserved by some inexplicable alchemy despite decades of proximity to water. The handwriting, delicate yet resolute, flowed across 13 pages in Elelaner's unmistakable copperplate script, though the final entry was dated 1 week after her descent into the well. This impossible document, authenticated by 3 independent laboratories and subsequently sealed within the Smithsonian's most secure archival facility, contained the truth that completed the circle of understanding. Eleanor's final testament revealed that the Harvine curse was neither punishment nor tragedy, but something far more profound, a 13-generation ceremony of alchemical transformation. The symbolic deaths of each firstborn had been necessary preparations, each child contributing one element to a metaphysical equation that required 13 souls to complete. Their abbreviated lives were not terminations but transitions, each one carrying forward accumulated awareness that finally consolidated in Eleanor, the 13th vessel. "I exist now in the liminal space between worlds," she wrote in flowing ink that still shimmers with opalescent luminosity when tilted toward moonlight, not as ghost nor revenant, but as reconciler of divided streams. The curse was never meant as punishment, but as preparation for a joining that could only occur when both bloodlines had sufficiently evolved through 13 cycles of separation and remembrance. Most revelatory was Eleanor's explanation of Salston's true intent. The well had never been merely a grave, but a chrysalis, a transformative chamber where the original mingling of Harvine and Levo bloodlines could finally complete what was violently interrupted. The 13 firstborns were never meant to perish, but to participate in sequential stages of a metamorphosis spanning generations. We 13 now exist as a single consciousness distributed across multiple dimensions. Eleanor's final entry explained, "The reconciliation extends beyond our families, to the very land itself, which bore witness to the original severing and now heals through our combined essence. The water rising from this well carries our unified understanding to all who drink from it, gradually dissolving the artificial boundaries between bloodlines that should have flowed as one." The journal's final page contained a precisely drawn diagram of 13 concentric circles, each labeled with a Harvine firstborn's name, with Eleanor at the center and Celestine's unnamed child forming the outermost ring. Between these circles flowed intricate patterns resembling both DNA helices and water currents, creating a visual representation of what Eleanor described as the architecture of reconciliation. This ultimate truth transformed the Harvine legend from Gothic tragedy to transcendent parable. Not a story of cursed bloodlines, but of deliberate cosmic resolution spanning generations, requiring 13 willing participants to complete a ceremony of reunion that began with separation, progressed through sacrifice, and culminated in willing transformation that healed not just two families, but the wounded land that held their intermingled roots. The amber-green waters of the well have become a mirror to both past and future, reflecting not merely faces, but the cosmic architecture of bloodlines reunited. Pilgrims who journey to what remains of Magnolia House often report experiencing a peculiar sensation upon first glimpsing the ancient stones, a feeling described variously as coming home to a place I've never been, or remembering something that hasn't happened yet. This paradoxical awareness, once dismissed as mere poetic fancy, has been documented with increasing scientific rigor by researchers who themselves fall under the well's subtle influence. The most comprehensive analysis came from Dr. Emmeline Thorpe, great-granddaughter of Isaiah Thornfield, whose doctoral dissertation on quantum entanglement in generational reconciliation earned reluctant acclaim from the scientific community despite its revolutionary premise. Her work demonstrated that water molecules from the well exhibit properties consistent with particles existing simultaneously in multiple temporal states, a physical impossibility that nonetheless manifests in measurable, replicable experiments. The Harvine-Lavo transformation represents not supernatural intervention, but the most sophisticated example of quantum biology yet documented. Dr. Thorpe wrote in her conclusion, "What appears miraculous to conventional observation is merely the visible manifestation of forces operating at the intersection of consciousness and matter, where intention shapes reality through mechanisms we are only beginning to comprehend." On nights when the moon hangs at precisely the angle it held during Eleanor's descent, those who keep vigil beside privacy policy, the well report a gossamer mist that rises not from the water, but from the surrounding soil, as if the very earth exhales memories too long held within its embrace. This luminous vapor coalesces into 13 distinct columns that, when viewed from the precise vantage point of the Harvine family cemetery, align perfectly with the constellations as they appeared on the night Maurice first claimed Celestine's ancestral lands. Local children born with the telltale heterochromia grow into their inheritance gradually, often experiencing shared dreams of copper-haired figures who teach them songs and languages their waking minds cannot comprehend. These children, regardless of their ancestry, demonstrate remarkable aptitudes for healing rifts, whether physical wounds, family estrangements, or community divisions. Their touch, especially when their hands have recently been immersed in well water, carries a tangible reconciling energy that physicians have begun reluctantly documenting in case studies published in medical journals under cautious titles like "Observed Anomalies in Cellular Regeneration Following Cultural Reconciliation Practices." The transformation continues to ripple outward in widening circles, touching lives far removed from St. Francisville. Scholars who study the phenomenon find their own family histories suddenly illuminated, ancestral wounds rising to consciousness with newfound clarity that brings not pain but opportunity for resolution. Genetic researchers discover inexplicable patterns in their own bloodlines that mirror the Harvard-Lavo convergence, as if the act of studying this reconciliation catalyzes similar processes within themselves. As twilight descends over the ancient well on this anniversary of Eleanor's transformation, the very air seems charged with expectant possibility. The boundary between worlds grows diaphanous, and those gathered in silent communion feel the gentle pressure of unseen hands upon their shoulders. 13 generations of separated souls reunited through one child's willing sacrifice, now extending their reconciliation to all who approach with open hearts and minds prepared to transcend the artificial boundaries between past and present, between divided bloodlines, between curse and blessing. As the first light of dawn breaks over St. Francisville, bathing the ancient grounds of what was once Magnolia House in amber-green luminescence, a profound silence descends, not the absence of sound, but rather its perfection, as if the world holds its breath in reverence for what transpired here generations ago. The morning dew glistens upon 13 white roses that have bloomed overnight around the well's weathered rim, each flower containing exactly 13 petals, an impossibility of nature that has become commonplace in this hallowed ground, where conventional boundaries dissolve through a child's willing transformation. Visitors who arrive for the annual commemoration move with instinctive solemnity, their voices hushed not by instruction, but by the palpable sense of standing upon the threshold between worlds. They carry silver spoons and copper trinkets, small offerings to place upon the moistened earth where Ella once stood before her descent. Among them walks a young girl with heterochromatic eyes, one amber green, one obsidian black, who has never been told the Harvine story, yet knows it in her marrow, as if the tale flows through her veins alongside inherited blood. The ancient oak that witnessed Eleanor's transformation now stretches its massive limbs in 13 primary directions, its bark inscribed with patterns that botanists insist form naturally, yet somehow resemble copper plate script when traced by fingertips sensitive to such things. Beneath its sheltering canopy, the final reunion commences, as it has every year since that fateful night, not merely a ceremony of remembrance, but an active participation in ongoing reconciliation. As the sun climbs to precisely the position it held when Ella first drew breath in this world, the waters in the well begin their subtle transformation from crystal clarity to opalescent luminosity, tiny spirals forming on the surface without any breeze to disturb them. Those gathered around feel a gentle pressure at their backs, as if invited forward by unseen hands, while the air grows thick with the fragrance of magnolia blooming out of season. The 13th bell tolls from the distant church steeple, though records will later show the bell was never rung that morning. With the final resonant note, the boundary between witnessed history and living present dissolves completely. For one breathtaking moment, those gathered perceive with perfect clarity what Ella understood on her 13th birthday. That separation is illusion. That bloodlines divided must eventually reconverge. That willingness transforms sacrifice into sacrament. As this vision fades, it leaves not emptiness but fullness in its wake. A profound sense of completion that requires no further elaboration. The well remains, neither monument nor memorial, but living conduit between what was severed and what has been rejoined. The water continues to rise, cool and sweet upon the tongue, carrying in each molecule the memory of copper-haired children dancing in perfect circles beneath the Louisiana moon. The legacy of Ella Harvine endures not as legend but as living covenant, a promise that what appears most cursed may through willing transformation reveal itself as most blessed. The 13th generation completed what the first began, and in that completion created endless beginnings for all who drink from these reconciled waters. This has been the Ghastly Journal. Until next time, remember that some stories are best left untold.